Greetings and salutations, everybody. I am the Beardy Red Viking, and this is a competition entry for Johnny Mac at Rock and Metal Plus. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm going to be entering a competition which was set by my good friend Johnny Mac over at Rock and Metal Plus. He's recently reached 500 subscribers. Well, a couple of months back he reached 500 subscribers and started this competition. He's actually since hit 600 subscribers, so congratulations mate, well deserved. Puts out fantastic content. If for any reason you do not know his stuff, I will link his channel down below. His competition basically was as a celebration of those 500 subscribers, and he wanted us to show 5 albums that got us into the type of music that we listen to these days. Now, I'm going to do a slight variation on that, as I think a few other people have done, because I actually do have a video planned where I was going to talk about the music that got me into the type of music, my sort of musical journey, so to speak. So I didn't want to do just the music in general that I got into, but what I thought I would do is I would discuss the 5 albums that got me into death metal. And I'll show you first of all what we're listening to in the background. This is Masters of Absurdity by the Manchester band Fetal Juice. Superb band. Been around for a good 10-15 years now. Local to me. Seen them in concert quite a few times. Vocalist Des, who wasn't actually in the band at the point of this album being recorded actually. But I've known him for years. I was in a band that played quite a few gigs with his other band, Burial. He's also in the band Wolf Bastard. I've known Des for quite a few years. So I'm well acquainted with Fetal Juice, and if you're not, you should be. Fantastic. So let's get into the albums that got me into death metal. Now, it's supposed to be showing 5. I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to show 6. Now, the reason why is because the first one, it isn't really a death metal album. Well, they're certainly not considered a death metal band, but I do consider this album to be a death metal album, and it was the first album I ever heard with death metal vocals on it. I previously had listened to a band, the first sort of really harsh vocals I ever heard was in a band called Knuckle Dust, a UK hardcore band. My mate Carl lent me a CD of theirs called Time Won't Heal This. I don't actually own a copy of that, I need to pick that up. But yeah, really ferocious UK hardcore in the vein of Stamping Ground. But yeah, the vocals, it sounded like a dog barking when I first heard it, and it made me laugh. And that was the first time I'd ever heard any kind of sort of extreme or harsh vocals. And then the next encounter with such things was this album, Fear Factory's Soul of a New Machine. It's their 1992 debut on Roadrunner Records. Obviously they're well known for their sort of industrial or cyber metal or whatever you want to call it, but this is more of an extreme metal album. It's definitely, if it's not a death metal album, it's definitely got strong elements of death metal on there. Songs like Martyr, Leechmaster, Scapegoat, Self-Immolation, Scum Grief, they've got enormous elements of death metal in there. So while you would definitely not consider Fear Factory to be a death metal band, this for me is the first death metal album I ever heard. Certainly the first death metal type vocals I ever heard. Obviously he's got his cleans in there as well, and there's definite industrial tinges to this album as well, but not to the degree that their later stuff did. This is a much different beast to what they became. If you don't know this album and you're not necessarily the biggest fan of Fear Factory, but you do enjoy a bit of extreme metal, give it a try. Next is Sepultura's Beneath the Remains. Now this is probably, again, not technically straight up a death metal album, it's more of a death/thrash metal album, but for me, again, it was one of the introductions to death metal. It's an incredible album. Songs like Beneath the Remains, Inner Self, Mass Hypnosis, Lobotomy, Hungry, Primitive Future. It's one of my favourite albums of all time. This is the original Road Racer Records release from 1989. Yeah, I got this on eBay in like I think 2001 or something like that, might have been 2002. Back when all I knew of Sepultura was Roots and stuff from that kind of era. So when I picked this up and it turned up on my doorstep, it was something of a surprise, especially with the sort of acoustic intro. I was wondering whether I'd actually received the right CD. But yeah, this is back in the days when you could pick things up on eBay for a couple of quid. Really good deals. You still can get a decent deal on there, but not quite to the same degree. But yeah, it's an absolute monster of an album, filled with absolutely monstrous riffs, brilliant vocals, and it's probably the closest that Sepultura got to death metal in their sort of Roadrunner era. They were a bit more death metal prior to this, but this album, strong death metal elements in it again. Death thrash album, I would say, I suppose, but as far as I'm concerned, it's death metal. And I would not be into death metal if it wasn't for that album. Now, next up, I'm not sure which to show you first. I think I'll show you this, because this is the first actual time I bought an album knowing it was a death metal album. This is Niles in Their Darkened Shrines from 2002. I remember picking this up from HMV. I was working, doing data entry in a Royal Mail office back in 2002. I was like 18 years old, and you could listen to music all day basically. So I sat there. I bought new CDs pretty much every time I got paid. I think I got paid weekly or fortnightly at the time, so I was always going out and buying new CDs. I remember I bought this at the same time as King of All Kings by Hate Eternal, and I listened to both of them, and I could not get into King of All Kings, Hate Eternal. I was new to death metal and that sort of extreme end of the music spectrum at the time, and that was just a bit too much for me. But this, with the sort of Egyptian sounding elements, blew me away. I've always been fascinated by Egyptian history since primary school when we'd studied it. I've always found it really fascinating, and just the sounds and the songs, the Blessed Dead, execration texts, Unas, Slayer of the Gods, Wind of Horus. It's just absolutely fantastic. And then there's the 4-piece In Their Darkened Shrines collection at the end. It's a 4-part song. I have got this on vinyl now, but I thought I'd show you the CD copy that I got at the time. But this is the first time I actually bought an album knowing it was death metal and loved it. Nile in Their Darkened Shrines, absolutely a brilliant album. Next up is At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul. I'm not going to talk about this one too much because I've talked about it a lot in the past. We all know what this is. It's at the more melodic end of the death metal spectrum, but it's also pretty aggressive, thrashy, it's heavy. Some of the lyrics are pretty deep and meaningful. And yeah, I'm not going to go on about it too much because I've talked about it before, and we all know this album. It's an absolute classic. At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul. Next up is not actually, kind of isn't the album that I'm talking about. The album that really got me into this band, there was one song in particular, I think you probably know the song, Spheres of Madness, from the album Nihility. I don't actually own that. I'm sure I used to own that on CD, but I can't find it. I must have lost it. But this was another one I bought. I think I bought this first. I heard Spheres of Madness, and at first it amused me because of that just sort of staccato sort of rhythm. It seemed insane, like just the extremity of it. I've never heard anything like it at that point in time. And initially, again, it made me laugh, but after some time, I got into it and I started to love it. And then I bought this album, The Negation. Again, it's got loads of great songs on here. The Fury, Three Dimensional Defect, Lying and Weak, The Negation, the title track, The Empty Throne. And then there's a cover of Lunatic of God's Creation, the Deicide track, to close it out. Absolute fantastic album. As I say, not the album I probably would have picked if I could have found it. It would have been Nihility. But I do think I bought this first, so it kind of makes sense. Decapitated, 2004's The Negation on Ear 8 Records. And finally, pretty much the forefathers of the genre, full stop, Death with Symbolic. Second to last album, but it was the first one I heard. Came out in 1995 on Roadrunner Records. The first song I heard by Death was Misanthropy, and it blew my mind. Absolutely loved it. It was brutal, but it was also catchy. It had that hook, absolutely superb. And then you've got obviously Symbolic, Empty Words, Crystal Mountain, absolutely stunning technical death metal album. For me, it'll always be my favourite Death album. Obviously, I don't own it on LP because I wasn't around and a fan of Death in 1995, and I'm not a millionaire, so I can't afford to purchase it in this day and age where they're going for a good couple of £100 a pop. But yeah, absolutely superb album, superb band, classic band. So that's it for the 5 albums. So now I need to do 5 shout outs to channels I would recommend to you. And I'm going to stick with the sort of death metal kind of theme. So some of these channels are much bigger than me. They probably don't need me to shout them out, but it's always nice to shout out the people that kind of got you into doing what you do on YouTube. So I thought I would do that. So first up, Mark G with a C. You'll all probably know him, but hey ho, not necessarily a recommendation because you probably have already subscribed to his channel. If you're subscribing to me, I'd be very surprised if you're not. Mark G with a C, all about the filthy, the dirty, the horrible, the death metal. Check him out, link down below. Next up is Liam, the Death Doom Metalhead. Clues in the name, he's into the death metal, he's into the doom metal, he's into the death doom metal, he's into the doom death metal, he's into anything that's death or doom related metal. But he's actually been talking a lot about black metal and just straight up doom metal quite a lot recently on his channel. Definitely highly recommend him. He's got a crazy collection, his knowledge is insane. Great guy. Make sure you check out his channel if you haven't done already. Again, I'd be very surprised if you don't know Liam. Everybody knows Liam, everybody knows Mark as well. But yeah, check him out if you don't know him already. Next up is going to be Death Metal Dylan, Death Metal D 1976. Fantastic guy from down in London town. He's had a bit of a rough time of it recently. I think he's had to move house. I think he was supposed to be going to a festival over in Europe. I'm not sure if he's made it to that. I know he's been selling a load of his records, but he's been having a bit of a rough time of it. So it's been quite sad to see that. But he only started his channel back in January, and he's been doing well. Really entertaining guy. Got a couple of cute little dogs that make an appearance every now and again. Definitely highly recommend checking out his channel. I hope you're doing better, mate. Be looking forward to seeing you again on YouTube. I know it's been a while for you as well. I know you've been doing stuff more recently than I have, but that's not hard. But yeah, hope you're doing better, mate. Hope the house move's going all right and you're settling into the new gaff. But yeah, if you don't know Dylan, check him out down below. Next up is going to be Cavernous Carnage, Dave. Check out his channel, his links down below. Dave is a very foul-mouthed Scottish fella. You can't always tell what he's saying, but you know he's going to drop the F-bomb at least 3 times in every sentence he speaks. But he's got an absolutely incredible collection. He's all about the extreme stuff. But he's also into all sorts of other stuff, like he's into hip-hop, he's into some other stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be listening to. But if you check out his channel, he's got an insane collection. He talks a lot about sort of collections by a particular band, what he's got by a particular band, what he's got by a particular genre. He does a lot of what we do in general here on the YouTube, but he's pretty consistent. He's pretty prolific, but brings out a lot of content. It's always entertaining, even if you can't hear a lot of what he says. Check him out, link down below. And finally, I'm going to mention Metal Mickey. He was one of the first people in the VC that I started watching. He's not strictly all about the death metal, but he's certainly been mentioning a lot of death metal recently. He's into all sorts of metal, really. He's got a glam metal collection on tape. He's got a collection of mainly death metal and thrash metal, I think he sticks to with his vinyl. He's recently updated his room. He put some nice brick wallpaper behind his stereo system, and he makes great content. He's got plenty to say. He's always very forthright in his opinions. Highly entertaining channel. Highly recommend checking him out. And he's got a great collection. He's got a lot of knowledge. He knows his stuff. If you don't know Mickey, again, I'd be very surprised if you don't know any of these that I've mentioned. But check them out. Links are all down in the description below. Thanks very much for checking out the content today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got anything to say about these albums, do titty tappy on the keyboard down below and let me know what you think of my selections. If you've got anything to say about whether Fear Factory's first album is death metal or is not death metal, by all means, put those opinions down below and we can discuss. Thanks very much for watching. Take it easy and I'll see you all very soon. Beardy Red Viking, out.